Hello students. So today I am here to present another chapter from your textbook Flamingo, Deep Water by William O. Douglas. So before we start with the lesson, I want you to think about phobia. What is a phobia? Do you have any phobia? Okay, so the Oxford Dictionary says phobia is an extreme or irrational fear or aversion to something. Well, if you ask me, I have almost all the phobias mentioned on this slide, barring ornithophobia. So, what does one do to overcome an irrational fear? Avoid that thing or take it head on? If you ask me, the best is to try and face it. It might be a challenge or a dare, as you call it, but with the passage of time, you will see how it ceases to affect you. And let me tell you, nothing is more satisfying than this feeling of conquering your own fear. For all we need to fear is fear itself, a very famous quote by President Roosevelt. So let's talk a little bit about our author, William O. Douglas, who, after graduating with a Bachelor's of Arts in English and Economics, he spent 2 years teaching high school in Yakima. However, he got tired of this and decided to pursue a legal career. He met Franklin D. Roosevelt at Yale and became an advisor and friend to the president. The following excerpt is taken from his book, Of Men and Mountains. It reveals how, as a young boy, William Douglas nearly drowned in a swimming pool. And in this particular lesson, he talks about his fear of water and thereafter how he finally overcame it. So, this is the treacherous Yakima River. And I have deliberately taken this depiction, which is also in your textbook, because the Yakima River had a very big impact on Douglas as a child. If you turn your textbook to page 23 and read this line, Mother continually warned against it and kept fresh in my mind the details of each drowning in the river. So, you need to understand why Douglas had aversion to water, largely because of his experience as a child and the kind of stories that he had heard in his formative years. So, the message of the lesson is in death there is peace. There is terror only in the fear of death. As Roosevelt had said, all we have to fear is fear itself. And children, all terrors and fears are in our mind. They are all psychological. If we want and if we have the determination and persistence, we can always overcome it. Douglas conquered the fear of water step by step by making himself a perfect swimmer. So now let's move on to the point-wise summary of the chapter. So as we've already seen that this lesson is an extract from the book Of Men and Mountains. Douglas had an aversion for water as a child. The reason being his mother's stories about the treacherous Yakima River that I told you just now, and the other one was his experience at the California beach where he was knocked down by the waves. He had gone with his father, and you know what was most frightening, that he was overpowered by the waves and his father was still laughing. He found it very funny. So these were the things that had an impact on Douglas. And he decides to overcome his fear. And how does he do that? He chooses the YMCA pool. And this was because the YMCA pool was safe. It was only 2 or 3 feet deep at the shallow end, and the drop was gradual. So, this is in your chapter itself, and this can be an important short answer that why did he choose the YMCA pool? So, you know, these are the 2 points. First, the shallow end was only 2 3 feet deep. The drop was gradual, and later in the story, a little later, you come to know that few people frequented this pool. So he was a little hesitant as it is, and when there were fewer people, he could be a little confident. So on a particular day, what happens is that he's sitting trying to gather his confidence. He's sitting at the edge of the pool when a big bruiser of a guy ducks him in the pool and then starts his struggle to save himself. Now, here on page 25, it is important. Just underline. He says, I was frightened, but not yet frightened out of my wits. Now, I'm drawing your attention towards these lines, children, because as you are aware, you will get MCQs based on reference to context. So, these lines are very important. Therefore, please underline it. So, this particular line, I was frightened but not yet frightened out of my wits, shows initially he was in complete control of the situation. And he feels to himself that he can make a strategy and do something to save himself. But what happens is that there is lot of terror in his heart when he is going down. And actually speaking, children, he makes 3 attempts to come to the surface of the water, because that was the strategy, that the minute he will touch the bottom of the pool, he will push himself with great force and come to the surface of the water and start floating. But that doesn't happen. And the description is on page 26. You can underline that. And then sheer stark terror seized me. Terror that knows no understanding. Terror that knows no control. Terror that no one can understand who has not experienced it. I was shrieking under water. I was paralyzed underwater, stiff, rigid with fear. And then, in the midst of the terror, came a touch of reason. I must remember to jump when I hit the bottom. At last, I felt the tiles under me. My toes reached out as if to grab them. I jumped with everything I had. So, for the first time, also, he was in control of the situation. Now, this is when he was trying for the second time. And he tried to take that push, but he could not. And that is why he experiences the numbness of death as he struggles to save himself. The misadventure leaves an indelible mark on him. Now, there are two very important words I want you to remember. One is aversion to water. He had aversion to water on account of his mother's stories and the California beach incident where he had gone with his father. Yes, the misadventure is he's talking about the incident that happened at the YMCA pool. So if you get a short answer where the question is what is the misadventure that is being talked about, you will give in one line his aversion to water and then you will talk about the misadventure. So remember that. So this continues to haunt him for many years. It ruined his fishing trips, his swimming, his canoeing, everything. Icy horror would grab his heart. Now this is also another important line on page 27. When did he experience icy horror? It was when he tried, he gathered his courage and he tried to go for swimming in the Cascades. It is then he realized that he cannot do it and he resolved to overcome his fear. Now, what did he do for that? He decided to get an instructor and learn swimming from square one. He went to a pool, he practiced 5 days a week. The instructor did a very nice thing, and that was he put a rope around his waist and tied it with a pulley to give him that confidence that he will not drown. And like this, the instructor used to help him go underwater with this support of the rope. He practiced like this for 3 months. Whenever, now remember, whenever he was underwater, the old terror would seize him. But the instructor helped him to become a confident swimmer. And that's why the line, piece by piece, he built a swimmer, like a jigsaw puzzle, similarly. And then the instructor asked him to swim on his own. Now, here, the line that is important is the instructor was finished, but I was not finished. Underline this because this clearly states that the instructor has done his job, but now he has to go and do it himself. What he has to do is overcome his fear. He knows now he can swim, but now he has to do it all alone. So now he wondered if he would be terror stricken when he was alone. He tried that. Initially, tiny vestiges of the old terror would return. This is also important. And when this would happen, what did he do? So that's a line on page 28. It says in inverted commas, trying to scare me. Well, here's to you. Look, and off I go for another length of the pool. So, he's trying to overcome his fear by taking it head on. To make sure that all the terror had left him, he went to Lake Wentworth, Triggs Island, and Stamp-Act Island. Now, these are certain names you will have to remember, children, because these will be useful when you are writing that all the things that Douglas did in order to prove to himself that he can do it. So he tried different styles, scrawl, breast, side, backstroke. The old terror returned in miniature, but he scoffed it away. There's a line on page 29. Well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me? It fled and I swam on. I'm reading these lines from your text because these are important lines for your MCQs. So, to remove residual doubts, he went to various other places such as the Conrad Creek Trail. He went to Warm Lake, and this you must remember, as I said, to include it in your answers. Douglas learned a lot from this experience. There is terror only in the fear of death. All we have to fear is fear itself. So this is the greatest learning that he gets from the whole experience, that you need to be scared of your own fear. Once you have overcome that, then there is nothing to be scared about, to be petrified about. Okay? And that's why the last line of the chapter, at last I felt released, free to walk the trails and climb the peaks and to brush aside fear. So he knows now there is no residual fear left in his heart. So the story teaches us that if we are determined enough and have the grit and courage, we can overcome any fear that comes our way without letting it overpower us. These words are very important, children, if you have to write the character sketch of William O. Douglas, because he had that kind of firm determination. He had that grit and courage to face things head on. So now let's solve some questions as per the latest CBSE format. The first type is MCQ. It had happened when I was 10 or 11 years old. I had decided to learn to swim. There was a pool at the YMCA. YMCA stands for option D, Young Men's Christian Association. What does it refer to here? So it had happened. Remember we discussed that? Option B, the misadventure, because he's specifically talking about the misadventure. Icy horror would grab my heart. This emotion is experienced by Douglas when? Option B, he wanted to get into the water of the Cascades. So this is based on your factual knowledge of the chapter. The main cause for his strong aversion to water is, yes, all of the above. Absolutely. Now, short answer questions are your 2 markers. How did the near drowning experience at the pool affect Douglas? This is from sample question paper 2018. I've given you 5 points. Mention 3 at least. And that's why I have highlighted the important ones. He felt weak and trembling always. Haunting fear gripped him. And then he suffered from hydrophobia for many years. The instructor was finished, but I was not finished. Another very important line. What does Douglas mean by this? Piece by piece, the instructor built a swimmer out of Douglas, but Douglas realized he had to challenge himself further. He went to various spaces, such as, we've discussed that, realized all we have to fear is fear itself. So, just make a note of this, children. I am repeating certain phrases and words which it is always advisable to include in your answers. Long answer question. This is from sample question paper 2019. The childhood experience of terror of Douglas made him stronger and more determined. Elucidate the above statement, supporting it with evidences from the text. So this question, if you look at it, it's a 5 marker. It's like a miniature summary because it talks about the experience at California Beach, which on account of which he had aversion to water. It talks about the misadventure because this was the basis of his feeling of terror. And then you have to move on to the next paragraph, and that is you will talk about gathered courage again, hired an instructor, terror returned every time he put his head in underwater. Then he learned from his instructor and then he tested himself. And then finally, the conclusive paragraph will be he fought with his terror all through with determination and strength. Kindly note, children, that your answer has to be written in 3 paragraphs. So the first paragraph about childhood experience, the second paragraph about how he overcomes that, and then the conclusive paragraph that he does it. Okay? Long answers are always divided into paragraph. Another long answer question, very factual. Fear is something that we must learn to overcome if we want to succeed in life. How did Douglas get over his fear of water? This is from CBSE question paper 2018. Give a very brief introduction saying that taking the same statement that fear is something that we must learn to overcome if we want to succeed just the way Douglas does in his life. Then the second paragraph you talk about the steps that first he appointed a swimming instructor, then he went to the pool, he practiced 5 days a week, he does that every day for 3 months. He learned how to swim and then he tested his newly learned skills in different lakes and water bodies, which we have already discussed. Please give names of the places that he visited in order to overcome his fear. So that's about it. Good luck, and I sincerely hope that this chapter is understood clearly by you.